You're listening to NFRN The Drive, your place for NFRN, NASCAR, and motorsport news. Hello again, everybody. I'm Colin Denton with RVN, and welcome to another edition of NFRN The Drive. We are in full playoff mode with the Amateur and the Truck Series getting their playoffs kicked off at Nashville and Toronto Lakeshore. The Elite Cup guys also traveling to Toronto to battle it out for round number 2 after a wild run at Texas World. We will have a jam-packed show, which we will get to in a moment. First, let's take a look at the headlines from the racing world. NASCAR released different pit procedures for the upcoming standalone races at Road America and Worldwide Technology Raceway. For the Xfinity race at Road America, it will be identical to what was announced at the beginning of the season, intended as a cost-saving measure, where under caution, you can only add fuel or change 4 tires during a stop and must make a second stop if wanting to do both. In trucks, it will be a little bit different. All caution periods will be quickie yellows. Teams can only add fuel or make adjustments during non-stage breaks. Teams cannot change tires until the stage breaks, and they will have 3 minutes to do so and make other adjustments and will maintain track position unless the team opts to stay out, and they will stop on the backstretch. Former NASCAR crew chief Cole Pearn is joining Ed Carpenter Racing to be the lead engineer for Connor Daly's 47 car at the Indianapolis 500. Pearn stepped away from full-time competition after 2019, now owning a ski lodge in Canada with his wife. He'll be reunited with a member of Furniture Row Racing's 2017 championship season, Pete Craig, who joined ECR as an engineer after the team's closing. And Paul Tracy is the latest addition to the Superstar Racing Experience, a new series started up by Tony Stewart and Ray Evernham, the former car champion, currently an IndyCar commentator for NBC. The driver list is now including Tony Stewart and Tony Kanaan, who joined last week, expected to reach 12 drivers by the start of the season next year. 6 races expected, tracks yet to be announced. Later on in our show, we'll review our Amateur and Truck Series chase competitors and talk to a couple about their playoff hopes. But first, let's take a look at our most recent racing action at Texas World. A lot of intensity for our first playoff race for the Elite Cup Series. Mitchell Mark, Amethyst Ashley out in front. Rampage, though, is going to find his way up to P1 very quickly. Very good at this type of racetrack, those 2-mile ovals. He gets up there very quickly, and he'll be one of the first ones to come down, as it's a bit of a split strategy coming to the pits, and it's clean to start off with. Cody Hagan staying out the longest on that first stint. And then Rampage will fly right by Julio Caesar, who came down a lap later than he did. Now, the second pit stop, not quite as clean. Car's coming down about 3 wide, and unexpecting Kyle Law to be in that first pit stall, and they all get collected in a big accident. Also going to be a little problem here for Johnny Gardner, who gets touched by his teammate, causes a little damage to the 9 car, but the 6 car is going to be stalled on pit lane and lose several laps. Now the group up front is a little bit larger. It was just the 1 and the 0. A few more cars join the fray, but when the 1 car comes off for his final pit stop, he runs into the back of Mitchell Mark, the pole sitter who was entering his pit stall at the time. Heavy front end damage that's going to bring him back to pit lane, but at a bad time as the 4 car turns to 57. Major hit with Johnny Gardner. That's going to bring out the only caution of the day. Big hit not only on the track but in the points. Also a little bit of a scuffle here with William Brock and Jack Porkins, although it doesn't look like it cost Brock a ton. Eli Bright would be the first one to get back to the line, but he was still going to run out of fuel. He came down late. Cody Hagan stayed out, and he was able to stretch his fuel on only 2 stops and take the checkered flag at Texas World. Looking at the finishing order, Jake Baskinger able to stay on the lead lap. Eli Bright as well, but he would go down 3rd. Julio Caesar gets a 4th place finish. De Barros, Mundinger also in the top 10. You can see all those playoff finishes off to the right, and how they finished there is just about how they'll look in our playoff picture. Baskinger, Caesar, Mundinger, De Barros all at least 20 points ahead of the cut line, which sees Jack Porkins and Ryan Maiden just on the outside, and Rampage falling all the way back to 12, 3 points ahead. Now we move on to the truck race, which saw its regular season finale. Different package means they're going to stay bunched up a lot longer until they make their pit stops, and James Smith, spins coming on. Also going to be a spin for Emerson Sims, who misses pit lane after that hit. And then Derek Anderline trying to come into his stall, similar to that incident we saw before. Anderline gets hit from behind, and a lot of cars stack up. They're going to get slowed down by that one. Jim Fowler, one of the playoff contenders, just rams right into the back of Ashland Boyd. A really mindless incident there. That's going to end up taking him out of the race. But Adam Kuhn going to find his way to the front, looking for a playoff spot. It would also create a big shakeup in the playoff standings. If Kuhn, who was looking to get out on points, can get the victory, someone else can move in. Jasper Wells starts to move up the field while Jesse McConnell starts to fall back. Carter Friesen and Jordan Probst looking to get underneath. At the finish, though, Adam Kuhn looking like he might have a situation similar to what he encountered at Columbia when he lost out to Barry Watson, but he's just going to barely beat out Benny Seitzer to the line, claim the victory, and claim a playoff spot. So Kuhn will get there, get the victory, beating out Seitzer, Ray, Simpson, and Duckworth, and become a playoff driver, while Barry Watson, a driver who had to have a great finish in this race to gain back on points, he did not have that, and he falls out of the picture. The winner at Columbia is going to be the only race winner across all three series that does not become a part of the playoffs, but you can see Steve Ray and Jasper Rawls get the position. And one other race we had on the weekend was the Open Modified race. Lucas Setz taking the victory over James Duckworth, who later qualified for the truck race. Aiden Wilder, Luke Evans, Richard Raffi also in the top 5. We saw some of our top-notch truck drivers having some issues. Luke Evans obviously made it, but guys like Jeff Cavaco, Cameron Vargo, and Adam Lewis did not make it in. Some crazy stuff at the end of those Texas World races. 16 guys still looking for a spot in the next round of the Elite Cup Series playoffs. But in the Amateur and Truck Series, they are just getting started. Field of 12 in Amateur, field of 8 in Trucks. They've got 3 races to run, and it all starts tonight. Let's take a look at those competitors. Starting off in the Amateur Cup Series, let's take a look at our first 2-time winner, Chris Harley. Got the win at both of the sister tracks, Pigs Cliff and then at Pig Speed Dome 3 races later. Got a knack for claiming those victories. Looks like he can do it at a variety of tracks. Got the Super Speedway, got the short track. Doing really well for himself. 4 top 5s on the season, 6 top 10s, has a second at Grand Detour, 3rd at Columbia. He's going to have a little bit of a problem. Gets that championship race, did not run well at Van Zandt. And there is a little bit of a question about his momentum. Hasn't had the best finishes as of late, but he has proven that he is worthy of being a chase competitor and getting race wins. We'll see if he can find his speed once again entering these playoffs. Now moving to the second of the 2 race winners, Kyle Law. Got back-to-back victories, the only driver to ever achieve that. He got the first win at Bump Drafton, able to win the race back to the line under caution, and then claims the victory at the road course at NACS. Now, there aren't going to be any road courses in these playoffs, but he was able to show that he has speed as well. 3 top 5s this season, the other one coming a second-place run at Mirage 2, the race after NACS. That could have been another victory for Kyle Law had he been able to get by Jesse McConnell. He also has 3 DNFs on the season. That is a little bit concerning. He didn't have the greatest starts of the season. The last 2 races haven't been great, but he does show that he has a little bit of speed under that Chevrolet. We will see if he's able to use it in this first round. Our 3 seed is Sparky the Sun Devil, a race winner at 8 Bull. Was able to also win that race under caution. We had a lot of races end under caution, a lot of late accidents, but he was able to get by the lapped car and kind of pull away from everybody, and that helped him claim victory. And then he followed that up with a great points performance, being the top among those drivers that only have 1 win on the season. 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s. You can see all those finishes there on the best finishes list. Bump Draft in 3rd place, 8th at Grand Detour in Nazareth, our last race. So he is carrying a little bit of momentum into this. Did well at Van Zandt, got the 12th place finish, and fortunately for him, his worst track type is the road course, which we don't have any of those in the playoffs, and it was also a 23.5 average finish, which means that every other track type is above that. So that's a good omen for him that he can run consistently, and he is pretty consistent at staying on the track. We talked to him about it. He says this, obviously, our results have shown we have been consistent, but there is room for improvement. We have shown throughout the season that we can avoid the mistakes of others, which is key when earning those crucial points. And obviously, he earned those points by getting that 3 seed. Up next, we have Donnie Moore, the Western Motorsports driver, got the victory in the season opening race at Columbia. He was able to make the late pass on Connor Mays, who's also a playoff contender, although he doesn't have a win. But the 50 car does have a victory under his belt, has 3 bonus points going into this round, and he is definitely looking forward to having a good run. 4th at NACS, 9th at Grand Detour, his 3 top 10s on the season. Hasn't been the greatest of years, but obviously is still part of the playoffs and doing well at the short tracks. Has a 13 average finish. Definitely going to be one to watch out for when we go to tracks like NASCAR, Milwaukee Mile, and Carbondale. And he is one of 2 Western Motorsport drivers in the playoffs, and we talked to him about how his finishes have been going On holding the 4 seed with just 3 top 10s, he says it's tough to run in a 4-car operation and have everyone be competitive. Our team got lucky with the Columbia win to give us the berth, and we've been scratching for every spot. We don't have the flashy finishes, but the car's consistent, and if we can do our job on the shorter tracks, we can point our way in. And obviously, he should be a threat to go after another victory when we head to some of those short tracks. His teammate Shane Borland lines up just behind him in the playoff seating. He got that late victory at Nazareth, another race that ended under caution. After a late accident, he was able to claim victory and do some donuts, and I'm sure they ate some as well afterward. Give a little reference to the sponsorship. 2 top 5s on the season, 4 top 10s. Got the pole at Nazareth. Van Zandt bumped drafting, running pretty well at those longer speedways. It seems like the intermediate ovals causing a little bit more troubles for the 60 team, but if he can get to the championship 4, with the way that he ran at Van Zandt, he has an opportunity to go for possibly a title. Just has to point his way in there or get another victory. And we'll see if he can get that other win. We talked about his last chance victory with him. He says being 1 point behind the cut line after Peoria. The goal going in was just to not make mistakes. We focused on race trim instead of qualifying in practice because we were confident in our setup and we were on rails from there. Hopefully it sparks a fire in my guys because the back half of the year has been great. And indeed it has, as he hasn't had any finishes worse than 23rd in the past 7 races. Dwayne Calloway, the next driver up in the 65 Toyota, got a victory at Pikes Peak early in the season, able to hold off Griffin Lynn late. He would be able to stay confident that he had his playoff berth in the bank, although he did have to keep his points position up. And he did pretty well with that, 5 top 10s on the season. Only 1 top 5, though, that coming with his victory. He had a 6th place finish at NACS, a 7th place at Peoria. He's doing really well at the intermediate ovals like Peoria and Pikes Peak, and that is what gives him the good finish that puts him at the top of the list among drivers at the track type. So if we get to those races, like this one coming up at Nashville or later on, like at Red River, he could be a big standout. Now, short tracks have not been quite good to him. Talking to him about that, he says we sort of just got bit by circumstances at those races. You've got to remember we led half the race at Big Speed Dome and couldn't hold the strategy, plus we got caught up in other people's mess last race coming at Nazareth. We just got to stay clean and we can stay in the fight. And we will see how he's able to do that in this first round. Moving on to our next driver, Austin Rogers got the victory at Peoria, our throwback race for the season, another one ending under caution after a late accident. But he was able to get out front, stay out front, and now has a chance to go for a title. All you gotta do is win and you're in, and he was able to do that, and now we'll see how he's able to do throughout these next 7 races. And we are now joined by playoff competitor Austin Rogers. Made the playoffs on a late victory at Peoria, able to get off pit lane fast. How does it feel being one of the 12 drivers getting to go for a championship?
Man, it feels great just to, get the experience in the Amateur Cup Series, and then hopefully we can come out here and get a good showing, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, beyond that victory, it hasn't been the greatest season for you so far. Only one other top 5 at 8 Bowl, no other top 10s, although a couple of 11th place finishes have snuck in there. What's the outlook for these final 7 races? Do you trust your car's speed to go out and win, or do you just point your way through?
Late in the season, we end up having a little bit of speed. I feel like we can fight and claw our way through depending on how strategy goes and stuff. So I'm looking forward to it, man. I think we're going to – I'm not really banking on how we did in the regular season. Postseason is a totally different animal, so I'm looking forward to it, man.
You don't have a standout track type, but average finishes of 13th at intermediate and longer intermediate ovals, those are scattered throughout these playoffs, finishing with a 2-miler in the championship race. What kind of advantage does running well at these types of tracks play for you?
Oh, man, it helps tremendously just because, it's a majority of the schedule, and, it's all through the postseason, and thinking that an average finish of 13th, I think is what you said, being consistent is huge. Eventually other contenders have issues, you can eventually be up there, move your way up the field.
And short tracks haven't been your strong suit. No finish better than 28th in 3 starts. Going to places like Carbondale and Milwaukee, where can you and your team improve in that aspect?
We need to try a little bit more things in strategy. I know we've been working hard in the shop, trying to get our short track program pretty good, but strategy is going to be huge for us. Undercutting or overcutting our strategy, depending on how the other guys do it. We might have to stay out a couple of times. Just play by hand. Well, it's been one of my weaknesses, through my whole career. So maybe I can turn up a couple notches here in the postseason.
And we've seen a fair bit of competitive guys in this series, some that have gotten 2 victories, some that have pointed their way in well ahead of the cut line. Is there anyone you see in a thread in this series?
I mean, every single person made the postseason for a reason. So I think everybody's a threat. I mean, people say everybody, people say my win was a threat. I mean, was a fluke. So I think everybody's a threat. That's just how I roll.
All right, you heard it here first from the driver of the 44 Ford, Austin Rogers, going for an Amateur Cup Series championship. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, brother.
Moving on to the last of our winning Amateur Cup Series drivers, John Gilbert got the victory at Grand Detour, was able to turn it on in the middle part of the regular season. He's been kind of up and down on the bookends of that regular season, but he was able to go to victory lane at Grand Detour. A little bit of a pit strategy that went right, and he was able to get the burnouts done. We take a look at his stat line, and he has 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s on the season. Also got a pole. Other good finishes, including bump draft in Pigs Cliff, those super speedways. Unfortunately for him, we do not have any super speedways in the Amateur Cup Series playoffs, so he's going to have to work to do better on those shorter ovals. Fortunately for him, his worst track type is the road course, in which we also don't have any of, so he just has to focus on those other track types that we're going to, and maybe he'll have a chance to advance. Next up, we move on to our first open driver. We have a record 4 open drivers in this series, and Connor Mays is top of the list. He had a very successful run in the regular season. He just was never able to claim a victory, but that is quite unfortunate because he's been running so good. Has a couple of runner-up finishes at Columbia, which we saw earlier, Pigs Cliff, in which he just wasn't able to catch up to Chris Harley at all. Got the 3rd at the Pig Speed Dome. 5 top 5s this season, 6 top 10s. He's been running very well this season, and you can see that best track type mid-speedway 4.0 average finish that coming at Van Zandt. He could be a real threat when we get to Pennsylvania Mountain if he's able to progress. He could be a legit championship contender even without a victory, and we talked to him about not having a win. He says it sucks to see 5 top 5s and a goose egg in the win column. We could have had Columbia, and I just chose a terrible lane. But I think when it comes down to it, I'd rather have the big trophy and no wins than the small one after I'm eliminated. Big mindset going into these final 7 races. Our next open driver is Robert Harrison. Both of the Gardner Racing teammates making it into these playoffs, although one has a victory, one does not, and Harrison is that one, still searching for that first victory. But he does have the consistency across this season to get himself into these final 12 drivers seeking out a title. He has 3 top 5s on the season, 5 top 10s. He's been very good. Has the 2nd place run at Pig Speed Dome, just fell short to Chris Harley, another driver who couldn't find his first win at the hands of Harley being out in front. But he is running very well. He ran 5th at Peoria, which his teammate won, 4th at Pikes Peak. Doing very well at the intermediate ovals, and there are a few in this playoff grid, which means that he has a real chance at advancing throughout this round. Now looking at Kenny Knox, another driver without a victory, although he does have an Elite Cup win. He joins Robert Harrison and Dwayne Calloway, being one of those drivers that were able to win up in the higher series, but he hasn't been able to find victory lane here in the Amateur Cup Series, which is obviously where he's going for a title. But he is able to advance his way in on points. 4 top 5s this season, 6 top 10s. We saw a lot of drivers that had a good amount of top 5s. He was one of those drivers that we kind of discussed earlier on in the season being one of those big threats. He just hasn't been able to find victory lane, and he has run very well at those longer ovals, but he also has a top 5 at Grand Detour. He's really able to run wherever he wants and do well at it. We will see if he's able to translate that into a win or a good points finish. We talked to him about his fight with Craig Martin for the final playoff spot at Nazareth. He says, looking at how we started the year, I'm mad we were even in that position. I'm certainly no road racer, and I'm glad there's none of those left, but I've told crew chief Levi Wally that we've got to focus on qualifying because track position killed us these past couple races. We will see if they were able to improve on that and able to go out and get a good finish. And looking at our last playoff driver in the Amateur Cup Series grid, Eric Van Arsdale, the only driver among these 12 that has prior experience in the league. Had the run in the Elite Cup Series in Season 1. Didn't make the playoffs then, but Colin Lindsay did make the playoffs, got runner-up. Didn't make these playoffs, and he finds himself on the outside, while Van Arsdale is finally making his debut in a playoff grid. 2 top 5s on the season coming up. Peoria just falling short to Austin Rogers. Got a top 5 also at the road course at Mirage 2. 4 top 10s on the season. He has the opportunity to maybe push out some good finishes, but obviously he was the last driver on points to get in, so he is going to have to work his way up. Unfortunately, looking like short tracks might be a struggle. 30.3 average finish for him there. Now we move on to the Truck Series, and we're going to start off with Mike Simpson, the driver that won at Pikes Peak and finds himself in the 1 seat. He's had quite a successful year, obviously beyond the victory at Pikes Peak, which we're seeing now. He's been doing pretty well for himself, able to get that 1 seed among all the other 7 drivers. 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s, so top 10 in half of the races we've run so far. And his worst track type, super speedways, we got one of those at Ontario, but that's a 19.5 average finish. You can see his finishes have been stellar and consistent throughout this season. No DNFs yet, has a pole, Texas World, Oswego. A lot of variety in those tracks that he's running well at, and that really fares well for him moving forward. We talked to him about being the 1 seed. That just shows the resiliency of our team. We've had a couple of hiccups, Twin Ring Motegi, for example, but we've grinded out finishes in the top 10 half this season. I think we're the ones to beat. And he's definitely showing it off, topping the board heading into these playoffs. Moving on to our most recent winner, Adam Kuhn. Getting the victory at Texas World, almost had the victory at Columbia, didn't quite pull it off, but kind of found redemption coming to this 2-mile oval and getting up on top. We saw the highlights earlier in the show, and that has moved him on into the playoffs, which he was looking pretty good on getting points to get in, but obviously get the win, gets you a little bit of a bonus heading forward. 3 top 5s on the season, Columbia obviously, but also Mayville, the road course, getting 4th place, and obviously a little skewed on the track type, getting the win at the only 2-mile oval we've been to so far, but at Pennsylvania Mountain, look out for him because it's a similar track type and configuration. Now moving on to Tyler Reed, our 3 seed who got the victory at St. Joltis. He came a little close on the gas mileage, wasn't able to even pull off some burnouts. He had to drift down the pit lane. He could celebrate with his crew there, but he really pulled it off right there at the end, and he was able to grab the victory, move on to the playoffs. Comes in as the 3 seed, 6th at Pikes Peak. Columbia got 8th place, doing really well at these super speedways. Could fare well for him at Ontario, but he's going to have to focus on those shorter tracks. 26th place average finish, which obviously Oswego's been the only short track we've had, and it's kind of an unfair comparison to say that he's not doing well at the short tracks when we've only had it on dirt. But we did talk to him about finding speed from the start of the season. He says, I think we're proven on super speedways, which is why I'm looking forward to Ontario. But if you look at just about every other race, we can pick out the exact thing that screwed up. Sometimes it was the driver. There was the miscue at Trenton. I think we're capable of speed, but we all need to be on the same page. We will see if they're able to stay on that same page moving forward into these final 7 races. Clint Mccomb, our next driver in the 8 truck, has the victory at Twin Ring Motegi. You can see he had to hold off a little bit of traffic behind him to go to victory lane there, but he is moving on into the playoffs. And now joining us over call, Clint Mccomb with Ramco Motorsports. Now you enter these playoffs as the 4 seed, and being right in the middle seems to be fitting as your finishes are either really stellar or back of the pack. What's your feeling for your team heading into these final 7 races?
I think you can't be nothing but confident right now headed into the final 7 races. Obviously, with a team like Ramco Motorsports, you expect success and you expect to be in the running for a great playoff run coming up.
Now, you've got 3 top 5s in a row during the middle of the season, tied with Stuart Gradden in elite and Kyle Wall, an amateur, for the longest streak of that kind. Since then, finishes of 39th, 37th, and 14th. What's the key to getting back on track in the results column?
Obviously, with our recent finishes, we haven't been very happy with the results. However, with our 37th place in the road course, we don't really need to worry about that coming up in playoff time. I think if we tighten up a few things here and there, we should be okay moving forward. And I have complete confidence in my team that those results from this recent stretch won't be an issue moving up forward.
Now, you've done really well on the intermediate ovals and the short tracks. You've got your win at Twin Ring, a top 5 at Trenton, and another at Oswego. You had a solid finish on at Texas World. So with good finishes at a variety of racetracks that the playoffs are full of, what does that do to your confidence?
I think my confidence is sky high. Obviously, I've shown that I am consistent at a variety of tracks. And when you can do that in this series, it shows that you are definitely a championship contender. And that's what our goal is as a team.
Now, we do have one super speedway in the fold at Ontario at the end of round 1. And a bad finish at the latest of those, Zen Joltis, gives you a 26.5 average finish at that track type. Is there a plan of attack there, or do you roll in there hoping that these 2-mile-long tracks coming up give you enough points?
Well, I feel at a super speedway, it's kind of a crapshoot. You just need to avoid the mistakes, and you hope that those results earlier in the season don't come back to haunt you. What I'm hoping for is that we can make those corrections in our pit crew, and we can also make those corrections on restarts, and therefore we won't have to worry about those bad finishes we had earlier.
And finally, heading into this final 7-race stretch, 7 other competitors you're battling for a championship. Are there any of them that you consider a threat?
Well, obviously, Kuhn is coming off a victory, and he's shown some great results this year. But being a driver for Ramco Motorsports, we have a tendency to turn it up a notch come playoff time that, honestly, we should be considered a threat.
All right, and that's our 4th seed in the Truck Series playoffs. Clint Mccomb heading into Toronto Lakeshore looking for a good finish. We will see you out on the racetrack. Next up is our 5 seed, Dalton Wise. He went to victory lane at Trenton. Was able to stay in front of a few drivers, and I think there was a little bit of pit miscues there that kind of threw everyone off, but Wise was able to beat everyone off and get to victory lane. That was one of 2 top 10s that he had on the season, Zen Joltis being another top 5, but only 3 top 20s this season. He's really going to have to pick it up because the speed not quite there. He was able to get that victory, but he was just one of those drivers that was at least able to stay inside the top 25 in points. He was able to show some speed, but he has to stay further up in the field. Fortunately, no DNFs, but that just shows that you need to pick up the speed a little bit. We talked about his overall season performance. He says, the one thing that's benefited us this year is staying on track. We've lost a lap here and there, but we don't have any DNFs, and we haven't finished lower than 31st. Unfortunately, there's too many finishes in the 20s and 30s for our liking, which is part of what he needs to get past if he wants to make a deep run in these playoffs. He'll have to get past the round of 8, which we'll see 2 drivers eliminated. Another driver that might be a little bit on the hot seat, Jim Fowler, got the victory at Oswego. That was a good run for him, but he is going to have to find a lot more speed because that victory at Oswego is his only top 10 on the season. We can see here his other finishes, 12th at Zen Joltis, 14th at Trenton. Those are his better finishes, but those are not inside the top 10, and obviously he is going to be in a little bit of tough luck if he wants to progress forward. Has a couple of DNFs this season, one of them coming at the last race at Texas World. He flew into Ashland Wood. We saw it on the highlights. A little bit of a mindless incident, and that might be a little telling on how this postseason could go. We talked to him about the poor performance heading into these playoffs, and he says, I think we've got to prove we're better than we've shown. I'd say 4 top 20s in a row. That middle part of the season was promising, but I also don't have a win on pavement. And obviously, that win on dirt, not going to be too indicative of the rest of the season. And now on to our drivers that didn't have a win on the season, but were able to point their way in. Steve Ray, the first of those, was able to pull off some consistent finishes throughout the season, and he will be our first open driver in these playoffs. A little bit concerning, he doesn't have a top 5 on the season. He has 3 top 10s. Pikes Peak, Zen Joltis finishing 7th, 9th at Mayville. Ends up being his best track type, but you don't want to have a best track type of a track that's not going to be on the schedule when you're at 9th place. And short tracks, 28th average finish, which obviously Oswego being that only one, not going to be too indicative of this season, but we're going to places like Myrtle Beach. You got to pick up the speed on those tracks because you want to be a Championship 4 contender. And our last playoff driver to review, Jasper Rawls, the other open seed in these playoffs, and was able to kind of work his way in on dramatics at Texas World. He was kind of in a position where he had to battle his way through a few cars at the end, but he was able to pull it off. But just like Ray, he's been consistent, just not consistent with speed. He has 8th at Mayville, which, again, another road course ringer, it seems like, but we don't have any of those in the playoffs. 10th at Pikes Peak, his only other top 10. Definitely a lot to be desired moving forward. Super Speedway's 28 average finish. Obviously, it's not a terrible bad finish, but it's certainly not going to help out when you have one of those in these playoffs. He talks about his playoff spot being decided on the last lap. He says, if I wasn't the luckiest person to have Adam Kuhn win that race, I don't know what I am. All I could do was run my own race in the second pack, but my spotter kept guiding me forward when he saw the 19 in front and knew I had to get some spots on the 62. That was just great teamwork there. It indeed was. He is going to move forward in these playoffs, but he's definitely going to look for a lot more speed moving forward. Let's take a quick look at our drivers that are going to be debuting tonight at Toronto Lakeshore. We have 5 new drivers to the fold. Kalexia in the 04, Lucas Yamamoto in the 06, Zach Winkle in the 91, Leland Fife in the 93, Mitchell Collins in the 95. We will see all of them attempting to make their first race on the track tonight. That was a great look at some of our amateur and truck series competitors getting ready to battle it out on the racetrack to see who will be the first champions of those series. Now, as we get ready to head into the race weekend, here's a few more announcements from the NFRN. If you are not currently a driver in the NFRN, there is still time to get involved this season. The Race 11 deadline, which is a couple races away for the trucks, will be Saturday, August 1st, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That is open to anyone that does not have a full-time ride in the Elite Amateur or Truck Series, and you only have to fill it out once, not every week. The NFRN has a merch store that recently opened up prior to Texas World. If you're looking for something to buy, head on over to the merch store, which is located down in the description or with a link you can see on screen. And if you are not a part of our Discord yet, that link is also down in the description. Get a part of the NFRN and ASCA League community, and you can get extra news and updates over there the quickest. So that is going to be it for this edition of NFRN The Drive. Thank you to the drivers that took part in our Amateur and Truck Series Media Day for the playoffs. We look forward to seeing you all on the racetrack, as well as our Elite Cup guys heading into round number 2. We are looking forward to 39 different streams taking place tonight as we get into playoff action. Make sure to look for those over on the NFRN X channel. For now, we will see you all at Toronto and Nashville. My name is Colin Denton. Good night, and good riddance.